Alexa, play Send Me Radio.
Welcome to Send Me Radio.
The story of Ruth and Boaz, the Book of Ruth, is a short yet profound narrative nestled between Judges and 1 Samuel in the Old Testament. It chronicles the journey of Ruth, a Moabite woman, whose unwavering loyalty and love lead her to become an integral part of Israel's history. It is a profound narrative of loyalty, faith, and divine providence, set during the era of the Judges in ancient Israel. This period was marked by social and religious upheaval, providing the backdrop for Ruth's journey from Moab to Bethlehem and her eventual marriage to Boaz. Ruth's Moabite origins and connection to Naomi. Famine and loss. Ruth 1 verses 1-5. Elimelech dies, and subsequently, about 10 years later, both sons also passed away. They had both married Moabite women, Orpah and Ruth. This left Naomi and her 2 daughters-in-law widowed. 2. Naomi's return to Bethlehem. Ruth 1 verses 6-22. Hearing that the famine in Judah had ended, Naomi decides to return to Bethlehem. She urges Orpah and Ruth to remain in Moab and remarry. Orpah eventually agrees, but Ruth clings to Naomi, expressing her deep commitment. The story of Ruth and Boaz, the Book of Ruth, is a short yet profound narrative nestled between Judges and 1 Samuel in the Old Testament. It chronicles the journey of Ruth, a Moabite woman, whose unwavering loyalty and love lead her to become an integral part of Israel's history. It is a profound narrative of loyalty, faith, and divine providence, set during the era of the Judges in ancient Israel. This period was marked by social and religious upheaval, providing the backdrop for Ruth's journey from Moab to Bethlehem and her eventual marriage to Boaz. Ruth's Moabite origins and connection to Naomi. Famine and loss. Ruth 1 verses 1-5. Elimelech dies, and subsequently, about 10 years later, both sons also passed away. They had both married Moabite women, Orpah and Ruth. This left Naomi and her 2 daughters-in-law widowed. 2. Naomi's return to Bethlehem. Ruth 1 verses 6-22. Hearing that the famine in Judah had ended, Naomi decides to return to Bethlehem. She urges Orpah and Ruth to remain in Moab and remarry. Orpah eventually agrees, but Ruth clings to Naomi, expressing her deep commitment.
Don't ask me to leave you, for I will go wherever you go, and live wherever you live. Your people shall be my people, and your God shall be my God. I will die where you die, and will be buried there. May the Lord do terrible things to me if I allow anything but death to separate us.
Naomi and Ruth journey back to Bethlehem. 3. Ruth gleans in Boaz's field. Ruth 2 verses 1-23. To provide for Naomi and herself, Ruth goes to glean leftover grain in the fields. She happens upon the field of Boaz, a wealthy and kind relative of Elimelech. Impressed by Ruth's dedication to Naomi, Boaz ensures her safety and instructs his workers to leave extra grain for her. Ruth returns to Naomi, sharing her encounter with Boaz, which sparks hope for their future. Tragically, Elimelech and his 2 sons died in Moab, leaving Naomi and her daughters-in-law widowed. Upon hearing that the famine in Judah had ended, Naomi decided to return to Bethlehem and urged her daughters-in-law to remain in Moab and seek new husbands. While Orpah eventually agreed, Ruth clung to Naomi, expressing unwavering loyalty. Ruth 1 verses 16 and 17. But Ruth replied, Don't ask me to leave you, for I will go wherever you go, and live wherever you live. Your people shall be my people, and your God shall be my God. I will die where you die, and will be buried there. May the Lord do terrible things to me if I allow anything but death to separate us. Survival in Bethlehem. Gleaning in the fields. Arriving in Bethlehem during the barley harvest, Ruth sought to provide for herself and Naomi by gleaning leftover grain in the fields, a practice permitted for the poor and foreigners under Israelite law. She happened upon the fields of Boaz, a wealthy and influential relative of Elimelech. Boaz noticed Ruth and inquired about her. Upon learning of her devotion to Naomi, he extended kindness to her. Ruth 2 verses 8 and 9. Boaz went over and talked to her. Listen, my child, he said to her. Stay right here with us to glean. Don't think of going to any other fields. Stay right behind my women workers. I have warned the young men not to bother you. When you are thirsty, go and help yourself to the water. Boaz ensured Ruth's safety and instructed his workers to leave extra grain for her, allowing her to gather ample provisions. Naomi's plan for Ruth's future. Recognizing Boaz as a potential kinsman redeemer, a relative who could marry a widow to preserve the family lineage, Naomi devised a plan. She instructed Ruth to approach Boaz at the threshing floor, where he was winnowing barley, and to lie at his feet after he had gone to sleep. Ruth followed Naomi's instructions. At midnight, Boaz awoke and found Ruth at his feet. She requested his protection and invoked his role as a kinsman redeemer. Boaz praised Ruth's character and agreed to marry her, noting that there was another relative with a closer claim. Boaz redeems Ruth. Boaz approached the closer relative, who declined to redeem the land and marry Ruth, fearing it would endanger his own estate. Consequently, Boaz fulfilled the role of kinsman redeemer, marrying Ruth and acquiring Elimelech's land. A kinsman redeemer is a male relative who, according to ancient Israelite law, had the responsibility to redeem or restore the rights of a family member in distress, such as by purchasing back land or marrying a widow to preserve the family line. Boaz and Ruth married, and she bore a son named Obed, who became the grandfather of King David. This union not only secured Naomi's lineage but also wove Ruth, a Moabite, into the ancestry of Israel's greatest king and, according to Christian tradition, into the genealogy of Jesus Christ. Historical and cultural context. The narrative highlights the practice of Levirate marriage and the role of the kinsman redeemer in ancient Israelite society. These customs aim to protect widows and preserve family inheritances. Ruth's inclusion as a Moabite underscores themes of acceptance and the universality of God's plan, challenging prevailing notions of exclusivity. 1. Character matters more than charm. Ruth was noticed for her character before anything else. Boaz says, "I've heard how you cared for your mother-in-law, and how you left your own land to live among strangers." Ruth 2 verse 11. In a world focused on appearances and instant gratification, the story reminds us to value faithfulness, humility, and kindness over external allure. Look for someone with a heart for God and others. 2. Loyalty is beautiful. Ruth's commitment to Naomi wasn't convenient, it was sacrificial. "Don't ask me to leave you. Your people shall be my people, and your God shall be my God." Ruth 1 verses 16 and 17. The Living Bible. A person who shows loyalty in hard times is likely to honor you in a relationship. True love is proven by actions, not just words. 3. God honors integrity. Boaz protected Ruth's dignity on the threshing floor. He didn't take advantage of her vulnerability. In ancient times, a threshing floor was a flat, hard surface, usually outside on a hilltop, where farmers separated grain, like barley or wheat, from the chaff, the useless husk. This process was called threshing, and it involved beating or crushing the grain and then winnowing it, throwing it into the air so the wind would blow away the chaff, while the heavier grain fell to the ground. Winnowing, the physical and the spiritual. In ancient Israel, winnowing was a crucial step in the harvest. After threshing the grain, farmers would throw the grain into the air and let the wind blow away the chaff, the dry, worthless husk that has no substance. The concept of separating the chaff from the wheat is a powerful biblical metaphor used throughout Scripture to describe God's refining process, judgment, and spiritual discernment. Removing what is false, empty, or unfruitful from what is pure, true, and enduring. Here are key scriptures about separating the chaff. 1. Psalm 1 verse 4. But not the wicked. They are like worthless chaff, scattered by the wind. This verse contrasts the righteous, who are like firmly planted trees, with the wicked, who are rootless and blown away like chaff. 2. Job 21:18. They are blown away like straw in the wind. They are carried off by a storm like chaff. This describes the fate of the ungodly, lacking stability or substance to stand. 3. Isaiah 41 verse 16. You will toss them into the air, and the wind will carry them away. A whirlwind will scatter them. Then you will rejoice in the Lord. You will glory in the Holy One of Israel. Here, chaff represents enemies or opposition, things that God will remove as part of his deliverance. 4. Hosea 13 verse 3. They will vanish like the morning mist, like dew in the morning sun, like chaff blown by the wind from the threshing floor, like smoke from a chimney. The people's unfaithfulness makes them as fleeting and weightless as chaff. 3. While the heavier, valuable grain fell to the ground to be gathered. Spiritual symbolism in Ruth chapter 1. Ruth and Naomi's journey can be seen as a spiritual winnowing process. The famine, the loss, and the grief, they were the threshing floor, the place of pressure and shaking. Despite all this, Ruth stood beside Naomi. The journey back to Bethlehem and the decision Ruth made to stay with her, that's like throwing it all to the wind. As they walked into uncertainty, it's as if God allowed the wind of trial and loss to blow away the chaff, false hopes, surface-level superficial relationships that have shallow roots. What remained? Faith, loyalty, true covenant love. And the greatest of these is love, which comes from one of the most cherished and profound passages in all of Scriptures. 1 Corinthians 13 verse 13. 3 things will last forever: faith, hope, and love, and the greatest of these is love. Ruth was the grain, the weighty, valuable heart that did not blow away in the wind. Deeper reflection. In life, God sometimes allows circumstances to lift everything into the air. Toxic people, relationships, friends, family members. What's not rooted in truth or love may blow away like chaff. But what's real, what's pure, will fall back to the ground and remain. Scripture connection. This connects beautifully with Psalm 1 verse 4. But not the wicked. They are like worthless chaff, scattered by the wind. Matthew 3 verse 12. He will separate the chaff from the wheat with his winnowing fork. Then he will clean up the threshing area. Naomi sends Ruth to the threshing floor at night after Boaz has finished eating and drinking, and is asleep beside his pile of grain. Ruth quietly lies at his feet, a cultural gesture of humility and a request for protection and marriage. Tonight he will be winnowing barley on the threshing floor. Go and uncover his feet and lie down there. He will tell you what to do. Ruth 3 verses 2 and 4. Instead of taking advantage of Ruth, Boaz sleeps. Then Boaz wakes and is moved by her integrity and promises to take the proper legal steps to redeem and marry her if the nearer kinsmen won't. He handled the situation with honor, following the proper steps to marry her legally and respectfully. Lessons learned. A healthy relationship doesn't require manipulation or compromising your values. Patience and purity are still powerful. Timing and trust in God will bring Boaz to you. Ruth didn't chase after a man. She focused on serving, surviving, and being faithful. In God's timing, Boaz noticed her. You don't have to strive or settle. Be faithful where God has placed you. The right person will recognize your worth no matter the situation. Purity over passion. Boaz wasn't just romantic, he was redemptive. Their union served a divine purpose, producing Obed, the grandfather of King David, through whom came Jesus Christ. Matthew 1 verse 5. A godly relationship isn't just about happiness, it's about purpose, legacy, and impact. Seek someone with whom you can build God's kingdom, not just share selfies. God can redeem any story. Ruth was a Moabite, a foreigner, and a widow. Yet God wrote her into his redemptive plan. Your past doesn't disqualify you from God's promises. In a broken world, God still brings beauty from ashes and prepares relationships rooted in grace, not perfection. In conclusion, in a world full of compromise, the story of Ruth and Boaz calls us back to God's design for relationships, where love is sacred, honor is real, and purpose is eternal. Wait on God. Work on becoming someone worth finding. And trust that when character meets covenant, legacy is born. The story of Ruth and Boaz exemplifies how individual acts of faithfulness and kindness can have far-reaching implications, demonstrating the integration of personal virtue within the broader tapestry of divine providence. In ancient Israel, winnowing followed threshing. Farmers would throw the crushed grain into the air, letting the wind carry away the chaff. What remained was the grain, heavy, real, valuable. Ruth and Naomi's journey was a winnowing. The famine, the loss, the grief, that was the threshing floor. When Ruth clung to Naomi, it was as if God tossed their lives into the air, letting hardship strip away everything superficial. What fell back to the ground was faith, loyalty, and covenant love. And as Scripture reminds us, the greatest of these is love.
Thank you for listening to Send Me Radio. Visit us on www.sendmeradio.net for more awesome Christian content.